The following show is a Pod Avenue production. You are cordially invited to have dinner with the King. Pull up a chair and join WWE Hall of Famer Jerry the King Lawler and Glenn Moore. Enjoy.
All right, Jerry. I know we're here, and I know you always get at me for eating all your food. So I'm going to order today while we're here, about to enjoy our nice meal, a Memphis smoked salad with some chicken. So I'm going the salad route today, Jerry.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm glad to see that because I tell everybody I've just been amazed. We do these podcasts each week here from my barbecue restaurant in Memphis, and you're the first guy that I've ever seen make sparks come from a knife and fork. It's amazing. When watching you eat, it's more entertaining than doing the podcast.
Well, I'm getting the salad today. It's a big salad. Adding some chicken to it.
By the way, when you get to the white part, stop eating because that's the tablecloth.
Jeez.
Wow.
My goodness. And you're going to, if people can go to your website, if they're not in the Memphis area or they're going to go to the Memphis area, they get the menu at jerrylawlerbbq.com. And they're going to have a shop, and it says they're going to be selling some rubs and some barbecue sauce.
Man, we're going to do it all. We're getting them in grocery stores. We got our catering service is up and running now, and looking at adding a food truck. You know, food trucks are huge around this area, and so we're going to probably Jerry Lawler's barbecue food truck roaming around the city before long. We got all sorts of plans, and of course, anybody out there listening that would love to have a Jerry Lawler's barbecue in your own town, they're available. Franchises are available, dirt cheap. You could afford one, Glenn.
I mean, I would love to, though. I would love to have my own up here in Cleveland, where you lived up here a little bit. That would be awesome.
Yeah, it would be. To
go in today's episode, this is probably the most requested episode or show that we're going to be doing, and a lot of emails about it, a lot of tweets, and I know it's still relevant today because you still do interviews about it. It's still written on national outlets, online and in the papers. We're going to talk about your feud with Andy Kaufman. This was 35 years ago this year. This is before I was even born. Your feud with him in Memphis, him coming to Memphis, you guys wrestling, him wrestling women. And I know, Jerry, you've done a lot of interviews. You've done a lot of audio stuff throughout the years, a lot of print media about this. And there's a lot of stuff on YouTube and the internet about your feud. So I know people can easily research and get the facts about it, but we're going to do a little bit differently. We have a ton of audio, a ton of promos, some match audio from your time with Kaufman in your feud that we're going to be playing. So we're playing that on the show, and you're going to be talking about it. And I understand that you have some stories that you've never told before that you're going to be sharing on the podcast as well.
I mean, as you said, I've talked about this many times throughout the years, and it is still. I don't know if newsworthy is the right word, but just last week, it was a front page story on the Memphis Commercial newspaper here. They went in their archives and they found a whole group of photographs that were taken the night of the match between Andy and I at the Mid-South Coliseum 35 years ago that had never been printed, never been published before. They put these all on the front page of the Memphis Commercial Appeal last week. It was kind of funny to see the headline at the very top of the paper said, United States invades Syria. It was with the missiles. And then the whole rest of the front page was pictures of me and Andy Kaufman, and the big headline was said, "Now you think that was a feud?" And so it is still talked about. It is still written about to this day, and it sometimes amazes me that it has had such longevity. But hey, Andy Kaufman was a major Hollywood star, and he's the guy that it's almost a cult following. The comedians of the just this past generation and the comedians out there now were huge fans of Andy, and this thing that he did where he ventured into the world of wrestling, it really caught the the wrestling world and the entertainment world by surprise. And it took it by storm. And it was one of the first times that wrestling got national attention. All of a sudden you had a wrestler, myself, with a Hollywood star like Andy Kaufman on the David Letterman show, and there were a lot of firsts involved with this feud with Andy Kaufman.
And like I said, we're going to be sharing some stories that you've never shared before, a lot of the audio. So we're going to start from the way beginning of your feud, even before you kind of got entangled with Kaufman. He was wrestling women in Memphis, and then you came along. So we have some audio from that. So we'll be playing, and we're going to be doing this in basically a half an hour, like when it takes in a meal. We're going to get our meal, we're going to enjoy our meal, talk about it, and when it gets time to pay the check, or with Jerry to pay the check, we're going to pick off. We're not going to have these shows one by one. We might do a 2 here, and then take some time off, and then come back to it down the road. So these episodes are we might have 5 or 6 episodes by Andy Kaufman.
And I hope, Glenn, that you're not trying to tell these people that you finish your meal in 30 minutes here. I mean, come on, man, you have more seconds than a 10-day clock. It's like we were thinking about putting a buffet line up here, but I said we'll have to put speed bumps if Glenn comes in. So. We'll do this we can't do this podcast as long as it takes you to eat lunch, because you're right, nobody has that much time to listen in one day. So we'll as you said, we'll take it in groups of stories, I guess, starting from the beginning and all the way through. That's another thing that a lot of people don't realize. A lot of the fans just know about the one match that Andy Kaufman and I had in Memphis, where I gave him a couple of pile drivers. He wound up going to the hospital, and then a few months later we wound up together on the David Letterman show. But what a lot of people don't realize, and what we'll explain today, is Andy came back to Memphis many, many, many times, and I wrestled Andy in almost every kind of match you can think of. He even went out and put a bounty on my head to other wrestlers. He brought in wrestlers from all over the country, like Ken Patera, Jesse Ventura, all of these wrestlers he brought in to try to put me out of commission like I did him. He had this big bounty going to see if somebody could give me a pile driver. But we had boxing matches, we had tag team matches. Even one time, he conned me into teaming up with him to go against the team of the Assassins. And then, of course, he backstabbed me and double-crossed me in that match at the beginning before it even got started. And, so we'll talk about all of this. There's a lot of things that the average person out there, the average fan that just knew about that one match, don't know about the feud with Andy and I.
And that doesn't even include the Letterman bit that you did with him. We'll talk about that as well. That's well known. That's in David Letterman's, when they mentioned the top 5 5-10 moments of the Letterman show. Your segment with Andy Kaufman, a couple segments on there, is always mentioned in the top 5. So we'll talk about that as well when we get to the point of that story. But this has been talked about on Eric Bischoff's podcast recently, with the WWE Hall of Fame a couple weeks ago that you hosted, and Bill Apter, who is the man that introduced you to Andy Kaufman. He talked about in his podcast is the whole question of Andy Kaufman. Does he deserve to be in the WWE Hall of Fame for his contributions? Not to WWE, but to professional wrestling in general. And I got to ask you, Jerry, with you being feuding with him all throughout those couple of years, does Andy Kaufman deserve to be in the WWE Hall of Fame?
Well, I think that without a doubt he does. I guess, and probably the main drawback or the main hold-up or resistance to that is the fact that, Andy never had a match in the WWE. But I think there's some people there's definitely a place for Andy, at least in the celebrity of the WWE Hall of Fame, because that match that Andy and I had is just, it almost supersedes any organization. It was just about wrestling in general. If you look back and really consider all the facts, that match was so important in what evolved, or the way wrestling evolved after. I think, and a lot of people have told me, that it's like that was the beginning of sports entertainment, because that was the first time that wrestling and the entertainment world collided head to head and then wound up working together. As a matter of fact, that's the reason I got hooked up with Andy to begin with, because Andy grew up in Long Island, New York. He was a big wrestling fan, from the days when he was just a kid. He watched TV and watched. I remember him telling me that his favorite wrestler was, the Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers, and he said it used to amaze him that he could tell that Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was going on television and intentionally trying to make people despise him, intentionally trying to make everybody hate him, but yet he was still popular. And Andy's told me that mentality, that way of thinking, followed her. He used that when he got into show business. I mean, that was Andy's modus of operation in all the shows that he did. He loved to tick the audience off. He loved to ruffle their feathers. He didn't want to go out there and make people laugh. He was not a comedian. He told me 100 times, "Hey, I'm not a comedian. I've never told a joke in my life. I really wish you wouldn't refer to me as a comedian." And what he was in reality was a performance artist. And he loved to do bits or shtick that would surprise the audience or shock them or make them upset or make them angry. And so that's what came about once he had that celebrity from being on TV show Taxi. He wanted to then live out a childhood fantasy of being a bad guy wrestler. He even said that on Letterman's show. He said, "Hey, I just went down to Memphis and was playing a bad guy wrestler." And that's what Andy wanted to do. And as I said, he grew up in Long Island, New York. And early on there, he went to one of the shows, one of the WWE shows at that time, of course, WWF. He went to one of their shows there in New York, and he approached Vince McMahon Sr. And he introduced himself, said, "Hey, I'm Andy Kaufman on the TV show Taxi, and I've been doing some." He had already started wrestling women in his, nightclub acts and all of this sort of thing. And he had already started the intergender wrestling champion and all of that. So he approached Vince McMahon Sr. with the idea of wrestling women at one of the WWE shows. And, he said, he told Vince then, he said, I'm doing I've done it on Saturday Night Live. I've done it in the Merv Griffin show, and I've done it in comedy clubs and nightclubs. And he said, but I've never done it in front of a wrestling audience. And he said, I just want to see how it would be received in front of wrestling fans. And so that was his proposition to Vince McMahon Sr. And in retrospect, lucky for me, Vince Sr. turned him down because, at that time, there wasn't any thought of wrestling and entertainment being intertwined. And Vince told him, he said, I appreciate the offer, Andy, but our fans are so skeptical. And he said, I just am hesitant to involve a Hollywood actor with our wrestling because I'm afraid that the fans will think, they're all actors. And so the fact that Vince Sr. turned Andy down on his proposal, it's the way Andy wound up in my lap, because as you said, Bill Apter was a friend of mine, and Bill was a magazine photographer and writer for the national wrestling magazines at the time, and he was always at the shows in New York, and he knew Andy. And when Andy told him about his idea, and when he told him that Vince had turned him down, then Bill Apter told Andy, he said, "Hey, you know what? I have a friend of mine, Jerry Lawler. He and Jerry Jarrett own a wrestling company down in Memphis, Tennessee, and they do big shows at the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum every week." He said, "Let me give you Jerry's number." And he said, "I think that they would be interested in doing it." And Andy said, "Oh my gosh, that's great." So I first got a call the next day from Bill Apter, and Bill said, "Jerry, you know Andy Kaufman?" And I said, "Well, I don't know him, but sure, I've seen him. He's on Taxi. He's Latka, on Taxi every week." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, he's going to call you today. He wants to come down to Memphis and wrestle some women." And I thought it was a joke. I said, "Oh, okay, sure, Bill. Yeah, I'm sure he will." And he said, "I'm serious." And he said, "I'm a friend of his." And then he told me the story of what happened, the night before in New York. And sure enough, hour or so later, I get a call from Andy Kaufman, and he gave the same pitch, I guess, that he gave Vince McMahon Sr. And man, I jumped at it immediately because I mean, here, we're down in Memphis, and as Andy would say, we're a bunch of hillbilly from down in Memphis, Tennessee, and so the thought it was really true almost, because it was like the thought of, oh my gosh, here's a big Hollywood star. At the time, Tag was the #1 TV show in the nation, and I said, here's a big Hollywood star wants to come to Memphis and wrestle at one of our shows. Oh my gosh! So we jumped at the chance to have him come down, and that's how that's how the whole thing got started, and that's why I believe that Andy would definitely be deserving of a spot in the WWE Hall of Fame, because that match, I don't even know if there is a more famous wrestling match in itself that they've made movies about it. They've it's been talked about on countless number of interviews, television, radio, everything you can talk about, everything you can think of, for 35 years.
Yeah.
I mean, what other wrestling match can you think of? And I'm saying this match has been talked about for 35 years, but not just by wrestling fans. I mean, by you can go and find people on the street that have never watched wrestling, but they knew about that wrestling match. You didn't have to be a wrestling fan to hear about that, because it made national publicity all over the country. That Andy was hospitalized in a wrestling match, and so I think that just the fact, the notoriety of that match alone would warrant Andy being in the WWE Hall of Fame.
And it's funny too, because WrestleMania was created, a year or a year after, 2 years after you and your feud with Kaufman, and we know WrestleMania as combining entertainment industry with wrestling. Mr. T coming to wrestle with Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper.
Well, it's no doubt. It's no doubt in my mind, or anybody's mind, I don't think. Even I was on the plane with Vince McMahon, not Vince McMahon Sr., of course, Vince with the Vince that we all know and love, Mr. McMahon, and on his private plane, and we talked at length about the Andy Kaufman thing. And he said, I've never told anyone this before. He said, but man, I was so jealous of the fact that, you guys had Andy Kaufman when we could have had him. And you guys wound up, you wound up being up in New York on the David Letterman show, when, it could have been all the WWE's show and WWE wrestlers in that spot. But the thing of it is, it was just one of those things where it was when I look back on it, it was so much coincidence and so much luck involved. I mean, Vince even told me, he said, not to say that we could have done what you guys did with it, because what you guys did with it was amazing. And it truly was amazing, but I can't take the credit for it, and even Andy can't take the credit for it. It just happened. It just evolved. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people think that, when we went on the David Letterman show, that we must have met up and talked about, hey, here's what we're going to do, and I'll wind up slapping you and all this stuff. None of that did not take place. I mean, that appearance on the David Letterman show and the slap and all was not pre-planned or anything. It just happened. And that was part of the chemistry that Andy and I had, and but I got to give the credit to Andy as far as the talent for someone to have never been around wrestling before, never been involved with the wrestling business before. I mean, he was just such a natural at it, and I guess that that was part of the mystique and part of the reason he was so good at it, because he wasn't one of the boys, so to speak. And so a lot of that stuff just happened, and it just unfolded in a way that it couldn't be duplicated, and it couldn't have happened as good as it did if we had sat down and planned it all out.
And the reason why I bring up Vince in WrestleMania is because Vince Sr. was old school about wrestling and didn't want to mix entertainment that much, and then you had the Vince McMahon we all know today. He liked the entertainment aspect, and you mentioned it, and he was jealous that you guys got Kaufman.
Exactly, and that's one of the other things he told me. When he saw the attention that that mixing wrestling with the entertainment world got. I mean, never before had you had wrestlers on the David Letterman show and on national TV show. It was just almost impossible to get that national. This was before cable, of course. It was almost impossible to get any kind of national publicity for wrestling because wrestling was all regionalized or territorialized. So, the Memphis wrestlers, they certainly weren't famous enough to be on New York television or nationwide television, and that's what this thing dropped in our laps when we had the opportunity to be on there, and Vince saw, my gosh, look what happens when you combine entertainment with wrestling. And next thing you know, I think the first thing was Cyndi Lauper was brought in, the music video with Captain Lou Albano, and then like you said, Mr. T was involved, and my gosh, every time you turned around, there were wrestling stars and Hollywood stars intertwined in all of the WWE shows, and hence, as I said, I think that was the birth of sports entertainment.
We're definitely going to play some audio with Lance Russell and Andy, the interview, and this is kind of like the preface of the whole Lawler Kaufman feud. And like I said, we're going to be playing that, and we're going to be doing it, these shows in half-an-hour chunks. So we're not going to be talking about the whole Kaufman feud. We're going to be going in order. But
well, let me just say this: if you're going to, I think I know some of the audio that you have. This happened. Once I got the call from Bill Apter, then I got the call from Andy. Andy's intentions at that time was, he told me the same thing that he had told Mr. McMahon. He said, I've been wrestling women on the Murph Griffin show. I've wrestled them on Saturday Night Live. I wrestled them on Mike Douglas show. All of these entertainment shows. And he said, I've wrestled them in the comedy clubs and that sort of thing. But what happens, I just pull women out of the audience, and they volunteer. They don't even have a clue what to expect or anything. He puts a mat out there, and he gets them on a mat, and then he has Bob Zamuda, his friend, as the referee, and they just start, wrestling, catch as catch can, and these women have no clue what is going on, and so and nor did the audience, because these people, these audience were there to see comedy or to see the Merv Griffin show or whatever, and all of a sudden they're watching a wrestling match. So Andy told me, he said, I just want to wrestle some women. And he said, I'll come down to the ring, and you can pick any volunteers that, you can pick them, or we'll let the audience pick them. I'll wrestle any woman in a match. I just want to wrestle in front of wrestling fans. And so we, that was the concept. That was what we agreed to have Andy come to Memphis to do. And so he graced us with his first interview that we ever heard from Andy, and it was all about women. And he was playing the bad guy wrestler and talking and degrading women. And it went on from degrading women to degrading Southern women. But I think we have a little clip of Andy talking about what he thought a woman's place was.
I've never met a woman in the ring in the 3.5 years that I've been doing this who was able to pin my shoulders to the ground. And it's embarrassing, but I'll keep doing it because they keep saying they want to try. And as long as there's women out there that want to try and humiliate themselves like that. Now, I'm not saying women are mentally inferior to men, because when it comes to things like cooking and cleaning, washing the potatoes, scrubbing the carrots, raising the babies, mopping the floors, they have it all over men. I believe that. But when it comes to the wrestling, when it comes to them getting in the wrestling ring, there's nothing up there. They're all oatmeal north of the eyebrows. They're all, we Tina for brains, you know what I mean? I will pay $1,000. I'll take on anybody who wants to come in that ring and volunteer. I don't think you can do it. You know why? Because I'm going to send you back to the kitchen where you belong. I'm going to have you scrubbing the potatoes and washing the carrots. Because that's where you belong, ladies.
Wow. You could tell that Andy, he had it down pat. He knew how to get heat, so to speak, and he didn't even know the meaning of the word heat. But I remember telling Andy after that interview, I said, "Man, Andy, that was some serious heat with the women." And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, that will make them mad at you." And so he said, "Well, yeah, that's what I want." He said, "I want them to boo me when I come into the ring." I said, "Well, don't worry, they will, believe me." After that, and sure enough, we had Andy come down to Memphis. he was his wrestling gear was. I didn't really know what to expect, because honestly I had not seen any of the stuff of Andy wrestling before. So he gets all dressed up in his wrestling gear, and it turns out to be a pair of like the thermal underwear. He had a long white thermal underwear top and long white thermal underwear bottoms, and then he had on a pair of blue, just like shorts, just like gym shorts over those, and then some, I think just some regular tennis shoes or something on, and that was Andy's bad guy wrestling outfit. So we showed the interviews, we had Andy in, and our Mid-South Coliseum would seat sold out like 11,500 people. And we did well in Memphis. I mean, we had a lot of sellouts on big events, but probably we averaged around 8,000 people. So, and we were always really excited if we got over 10,000, and of course the sellout was fantastic. That's what we always strive for. But we wrestled in the Mid-South Coliseum every single Monday night of the year. It was a weekly event, and so it was tough to sell out week after week. So 8,000 fans on a weekly basis was a big deal. But first time Andy came in, turn-away crowd, complete sellout. And part of it was just the allure of seeing in person a big Hollywood TV star. These kind of stars didn't come to Memphis, Tennessee in that day and time on a regular basis. So, the people turned out in droves. Half of them, I think, just to see Andy, the TV star, and the other half to see Andy, the bad guy wrestler, get his butt kicked by some of our good Southern women, that were going to challenge him. And so the way the thing went down, we had Lance Russell up in the ring and asked for volunteers. And I guess, oh my gosh, probably a dozen or more women came running down to the ring out of the crowd, and they all wanted to, try Andy. So we had the audience by applause decided on the final four, and that's the way it went. They had four women. It was a challenge, and I think at that time, Andy had offered a $500 prize to any woman that could pin Andy's shoulders to the mat. And so we had no idea what to expect, but it was phenomenal. I mean, we rang the bell, the match started, and I think probably this is the first time that Andy had done this in an actual wrestling ring. Before when he wrestled these women, it was on a mat or just on a floor or on stage or something. But it was fantastic. But Andy, he knew enough to stay. If the woman ever got the best of him or got the upper hand at all, he would try to stay on his knees and elbows and not let him get him turned to where his shoulders would be even close to getting pinned. And so he went through all the four women, and in each one of them probably in a minute or less before he pinned them all. And then of course he got up and strutted around the ring, and just like and I'm sure visions of Nature Boy Buddy Rogers were going through Andy's mind, but he did the great job of playing bad guy wrestler, and he had the entire 11,500 people against him. They wanted to see him get his butt kicked, but it didn't happen. And so that was the ultimate goal of Andy. And when the night was over, came back to the locker room, he had the biggest smile on his face. He was so happy, and for all intents and purposes, that was going to be it. I mean, that was our whole. That was our whole deal with Andy, that he comes down one time to Memphis to wrestle the women. He did it, and I could tell, that he was very happy, and I think he was ready to head back to Hollywood, with chalking off his bucket list. But Jerry Jarrett and I are looking out there at that 11,500 people paid attendance, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, this is awesome. In the wrestling world, we try to have rematches or follow-ups or whatever you want to do to keep the program going whenever it's successful. And so Jerry and I both went to Andy and said, Andy, this was tremendous. And the fans didn't get to see what they wanted to see. This is wide open for for a return match if you want to come back again. And Andy's eyes just lit up. It was like, really? You let me come back and do it again? And so we were both ecstatic. You know, he said, yes, we would love to have you come back and do it again, because I think we'll have another 11,500 people coming back. And so that's how we worked into a return match. And I think the second time that he came back was when he finally ran into some trouble with a young lady named Foxy. And she was the first one to really take Andy to the limit and really give Andy a good fight, and almost pinned him a couple of times. And so, and I think you may have a clip of Andy talking about what happened with his second time in Memphis, or maybe when he was planning to come back to Memphis.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm very disappointed about the challenges that I received last week. As some of you might have seen last week, I polished off 4 women in a row, all in 30 seconds each. 30 seconds each. Now, I was a little disappointed. I'm going to come back in about a month, and I'm not going to offer $500. I have so much confidence in myself, I will offer $1,000 to any woman that can beat me in this ring in a month. Not only that, shut up, I'm talking right now. I'm talking right now. I want silence when I speak. Okay, now just be quiet. I will pay $1,000 to any woman that will beat me in this ring. I will not only do that, I will shave my head completely bald if I am beaten here. And any woman that will beat me, as an extra prize, she will get to marry me right here. She will take my hand in marriage. I will offer my hand in marriage if she beats me right here. That is a promise.
Can you imagine? I mean, we've seen stipulations and all sorts of stipulations in wrestling matches down through the years, but that was the first time I'd ever seen anybody offer their hand in marriage to the person that beat them in a wrestling match. I mean, you know, he said he'd give his head, he said he'd give $1,000, but then he offered to marry the person that could beat him at the Mid-South Coliseum. So, man, the stage was set. Once again, Andy came back. We had 4 more women that wanted to go against Andy, and we had, more important than that, another turn-away sellout crowd. So everybody was just overjoyed with the way things were going. And once again, I mean, Jerry Jarrett and I were just smiling all the way to the bank on the deal, because this was something that just fell in our laps. You know, we would struggle every single week to try to, you know, get our 8,000 plus fans in the Mid-South Coliseum and rack our brains to come up with something that would draw a sellout. And all of a sudden, Andy Kaufman just appeared out of the blue, and we're selling out week after week with the guy. And so he came back with this outrageous proposal and the stipulations, and what happened was he had faced 4 women again. The first 3 he disposed of pretty quickly, and then the last one was a young lady named Foxy Brown. And she was a little fire plug. She was a little spitfire, man. I'm telling you, when the bell rang and Andy and Foxy started, she ran across the ring. She lunged at Andy. She grabbed him. She picked him up, gave him a body slam. It was amazing. The roof went off the top of the Coliseum. It was the first time that any of these women had got the upper hand on Andy Kaufman. And Andy started scrambling. I was watching him. His eyes were big. He didn't know what had hit him. And he started scrambling. He crawled across the ring on his hands and knees, and he grabbed the bottom rope, and Foxy grabbed those little thermal underwear, and she was pulling him back into the ring, and she almost he was reaching back trying to keep his underwear from coming down, and she was pulling him back, and it was classic. I mean, Andy was in shock. He was in fear of losing the $1,000 and having to marry Foxy Brown right on the spot there. She was on her way to beating Andy Kaufman, and the crowd was going nuts. And so I watched it over and over, and I think that all of a sudden, she was doing so well, and then all of a sudden she just, boom, hit the wall. It was like, we have a term in wrestling, when you get dry mouth or cotton mouth, you blow up. You're just exhausted. You're winded. And I think that's what happened to Foxy after about a minute and a half into this match. She just blew up, and she lost all her energy. And Andy was panicking because he was almost beaten. And then Andy was able to turn the tables and get the best of Foxy and pin her. And she was just, but the people were going crazy for the couple of minutes that she lasted in there against Andy. And so when Andy came back to the locker room, he's just like, he was one of those things where he said, whew. It was like he knew that he almost got beat. And he just said, he just said, man, that was close, wasn't it? I said, man, it was close. You're right. And I said, but Andy, this is the greatest thing that could have ever happened. And he said, what are you talking about? And once again, I'm promoter Jim, thinking about how do we get another return out of this? And I said, man, this girl did so well. I said, let me go run her down and talk to her. And I said, you come back next week. I'm just trying to think of anything to get Andy to keep coming back. I said, you come back next week, Andy, and I'll talk to Foxy, and I'll go on television, and I'll tell everybody that I'm going to train Foxy. I'm going to give her a few pointers. I'm going to show her that she can't seem so close to beating Andy on her own, and just with a few tips from the King, she'll be able to beat Andy Kaufman. She'll win the $1,000, and she'll get to marry Andy Kaufman, and he'll shave his head right in the middle of the ring. It'll be the greatest thing ever. And he said, really, you think? And I said, yes. I said, it'll be awesome. And so, that's how the return match came out. We brought Andy back the following week, another 11,500 turn-away crowd at the Coliseum to see Foxy go in against Andy with the King in her corner. And so what happened, we didn't sit down. We didn't plan anything. The only thing we did was go on television, and I made that interview saying that I was going to show her a few holds, and I gave her a few pointers, and I think that she'll be able to beat Andy. So we come back with a big return match, and to be perfectly honest with you, and Foxy in this one, she really didn't do as well as she did the first time. It was like, I think all of a sudden she had the whole week to think about what she was doing, and she was out there in front of 11,500 people staring at her, cheering her on and everything. And I think it was just overwhelming for the young lady. And so Andy pretty much dominated her in the match, and he got her down and he pinned pretty quickly. 1, 2, 3. And the people were booing Andy. And then Andy continued playing the bad guy. He just sat down on Foxy, and he just grabbed her by her hair, and he was like rubbing her face in the mat. And all of a sudden, I've been standing there in Foxy's corner the whole time, and suddenly this sellout crowd is looking at me and going, King, what are you letting this goofball do this to your protege for, And then all of a sudden the crowd starts chanting, Jerry, and I'm like, wait a minute, what am I going to do? So it just went on with him rubbing her face, and so I just, I had to go in and kind of save her or help her a little bit. So I went in and I just grabbed Andy by both his arms and kind of pulled him up off of her and tossed him a little ways across the ring. And man, that was when the magic happened. That was when Andy flipped the switch and turned on and just went into this full Nature Boy Buddy Rogers bad guy rant that I thought was legit. I mean, he started screaming at me, and I looked him in the eyes, and he was like a wild man. He started screaming, you can't touch me. I'm from Hollywood. You're a wrestler. I'm not a wrestler. You can't put your hands on me. I will sue you. I will sue you for everything you're worth. And he started screaming this whole tirade. As a matter of fact, I think, do we have the audio of Andy doing that? I mean, I'm standing there thinking, this guy for real? What is going on here?
We do.
Well, let's hear it.
I will sue Lawler
I will sue you. You don't touch me. I am from Hollywood. I'll get Hollywood against you, baby. I'll sue you, baby. Lawler, I don't wrestle men. You don't touch me, baby. I'll sue you for everything you've got. You won't have anything left when I'm through with you.
And that's how it all was set up and started with your first match with Andy Kaufman. And the next episode, we're going to be talking about the challenges, where he sends a video into the studio. He sends you a deposition, and you put the challenge out there, and he accepts. And we'll talk about the first match in the part 2 of our Andy Kaufman series. But Jerry, just in part 1, a lot going on. I mean, before we wrap it up, I know the check is here, but what was going through your mind through all this? And I know you said, the crowd was there. You were, obviously the crowd was bigger than you usually got. But what was going through your mind as a guy, as a wrestler, and seeing this all, unfold in front of you?
Well, I mean, it was just like, it was, part of me was the promoter, and I'm loving these sellout crowds. Part of me was a fan enjoying the fact that a big Hollywood TV star like Andy Kaufman was here. But then suddenly, part of me was like a mark that didn't know what was going on. And the fact that here's this guy screaming that he's going to sue me and that he's from Hollywood. And I'm thinking, well, is he serious? I mean, yeah, I did just touch him. I did just pull him up off of the girl. And maybe in his mind that, he thinks that he should have not had any contact with a male wrestler, and he's really serious about suing me and suing the Memphis promotion. And suddenly I was concerned, and so then we got back to the locker room, and I'm sitting there with Jerry Jarrett, and Andy's still out there screaming, that he's going to sue everybody, and so I'm back there, looking at Jerry Jarrett, and I said, I think we're going to get sued, and. So all of a sudden, Andy comes through the curtains, and he comes in the back and walks in our dressing room, and he's got this mean look on his face. And I'm just standing there waiting for him to scream at me again, and all of a sudden it turns into a little childish smile, and he just looked at us and said, "How was that?" And I said, "How was that? It was awesome." "What do you mean, how was that?" "It was great." And he was so happy. It was just like, it was just like all of this stuff was like a revelation to Andy that he was becoming part of the wrestling business. And, after that, he told me at one point, he said, I would give up everything that I'm doing in Hollywood. He said, I just love this so much. I would give up the comedy clubs. I would give up Taxi, which he didn't like doing Taxi at all anyway. But he said, I would give all of this up in a minute if I could just stay involved with wrestling. And so we kept him involved for quite a while. And we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, definitely. The shove has happened. The challenge will be laid down next week. We'll talk about the first match. We have audio from the promos and the match as well. And that will be part 2 of our Andy Kaufman series. But thank you for everybody listening. Thank you to everybody responding to our Undertaker episode. A lot of people loved that Undertaker episode as all the old school memories you had with him and as the Master of Pain in Memphis. You can go back, listen to all our previous episodes on Libsyn, and we're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on your iPhone and your Android. So you listen to any kind of device, we're on there. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. We have some clips on YouTube as well. And you can follow us on Twitter, Dinner with King. We're on Facebook, Dinner with the King. And you can stay up to date with what we're doing on the show and submit your questions that way. With that, the check has been paid. Thank you, King, for dinner once again. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Next week on Dinner with the King.
Matter of fact, they're probably smarter than you because you don't have any brains. You're from Memphis, Tennessee. All you do is plow the fields and farm and farm and is that how you talk from Memphis, Tennessee, Mr. Lawler? Duh. See, Mr. Lawler, you don't have any brains.
The preceding show is a Pod Avenue production.